I'm Ryan Milliken from Hardway Performance, and you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
I'm Dimitri Miller with No Zone Diesel.
This is Anthony Rings from XDP.
This is Jaron Holder from Holderdown Performance.
Corey Willis from PPEI.
I'm Drew with D&J Precision Machine.
I'm Pinky.
And you're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
Diesel Podcast.
You're listening to the Diesel Podcast.
The Diesel Podcast. The one and only Diesel Podcast.
What is going on, Diesel Nation? You guys have been giving us tons of awesome feedback on iTunes and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. Keep hitting us up. There's so many episodes we have planned based off your guys' suggestions, so we want to thank you for that. Also, make sure and check out thedieselpodcast.com. We've got all the episodes there. We've got an apparel store, blogs, tons of different things. So if you're looking for one place that has all the episodes, you can listen whenever you want. Just go to thedieselpodcast.com. Today's episode's really cool. It's for the Cummins guys out there. If you got a 030759, you're planning on doing a build over 1,000 horse, should you maybe think about doing a 6.4 liter Cummins? Maybe stay with 5.9, maybe go to something different. We're going to talk about that. Before we do, though, we want to thank ATS Diesel and Dan's Diesel Performance for making this episode possible. Just go to atsdiesel.com and dansdieselperformance.com if you're looking to do anything with your truck, from a full build to bolt-on parts, pretty much anything. We're excited to talk about a sort of a new topic, but one that we've gotten a lot of inquiries with, and listeners asking, well, what is this engine? I keep seeing it. What does it do? So today we're going to talk about a 6.4 liter Cummins. And we've got Ryan on. How you doing this afternoon, Ryan?
I'm good.
Staying busy out there? Summertime?
Yes, sir. Yes, definitely.
I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in the diesel community and racing and everything out there.
Well, I'm Ron Acker with Cruel Intentions Diesel. Kind of got started just about like most of the other enthusiasts out there. Wanted to mod my truck, wanted to go a little faster than the next guy, pull a little further than the next guy, and it spirals out of control, as we all know.
It does. Pretty quick, too.
Yes, definitely. So, you go from one day driving a stockish truck to 500 horsepower to needing more, and you've got broken engine parts, and where do you go from there? So, that kind of drove us into where we are now with, experimenting with what we can do to make, that big number and make it as reliably as possible.
What kind of truck did you start out with as far as in this journey?
I've got an 04.5 Dodge. Obviously started out as a 5.9 with a 48. We made 950 at the tire and kind of got a little antsy with it, and the bottom end decided that it was done. So whenever it broke, we kind of stepped back and punted and went through several different setups to wind up with the 6.4 that we have now. So it's a 6.4 with a built 48, in-house built 48, Darren Morrison valve body, a couple little things inside, and like I said, the 6.4 with Carrillos and amazingly pretty stock for what we do with the truck. It's a truck that runs mid to high nines at really close to full weight. So, not too slouchy for what it is.
No, it's moving. It's moving. For our listeners out there who may not know what a 6.4 is, say they know what they've heard of a 5.9, they've heard of a 6.7. Can you walk us through what exactly is a 6.4 liter Cummins?
Well, the 6.4 originally kind of started out with Ashley Black from Black's Diesel out of Georgia. He was, taking the 6.7 block with the 5.9 crank and cutting the deck of the block down to get your 6.4 liters of displacement. You start kind of looking around and noticing that these 6.4s are actually living a little bit longer than the 5.9s as far as, wear and so forth and so on, because the stress on the rod bearings just was not there. The difference in the rod angle made a big difference in, stress on the bottom end. So where hard part failures weren't exactly really common in the 1,000 horsepower trucks, you were seeing guys that were really punishing, bottom end bearings. So Ashley does his 6.4, and all we had available at the time was a standard length rod, whatever. Then fast forward to now, where you have an abundance of rod options for the 6.4s, and you've even got quite a few guys that are doing a custom piston, custom rod, and a sleeved block to get the 6.4 liters of displacement and keep the rod angle proper without, and make a huge number now versus the 1,000 horsepower that we were playing with, a few short years ago.
Now, at what power level was this something where you guys were like, we need to change it up a bit?
I myself experienced quite a bit of rod bearing where, once you broke the 1,000 horsepower, once you busted the door down to 1,000 horsepower, it seemed like, the trucks were living. If they didn't get a lot of street miles, no real negative effects. The trucks that were really, being punished on the street and racing and sled pulling, we'd start seeing a lot of rod bearing wear. We'd pull them apart to inspect every season, every other season, whatever. And we were starting to notice that, we were just really quick wearing bearings down, getting into Babbitt material or whatever. And it was just amazing how quick you could go through a set of bearings. Coating wasn't really helping. I mean, the coating just kind of, it flaked most of the time. So we kind of started playing with the 6.4s. Well, once you take that 80,000 longer rod, it straightens the rod angle up a little bit. You don't side load the rod near as bad, as you start the compression stroke or the power stroke. And with the rod angle being better on the start of the power stroke, it doesn't punish the bearings as bad. It's more of a straight on load than a side load. And then, of course, fast forward a little bit more, we go from, having 1,000 horsepower trucks to needing trucks that make 13, 14, 1,500 plus horsepower to be competitive. And that throws a whole new ball game, that throws a whole new curve at the ball game, because you've got to go from 1,000 horsepower where, for the most part, you can make a stock block live or whatever, to 1,200 horsepower where the stock block gets on borrowed time. So then we've got to go through, how do we make the cylinders live? And, we've got options from, a stock 6.7 bore with a decent sleeve all the way down to, a custom piston and rod with a smaller bore and the 6.7 stroke, but the longer rod and custom piston takes the rod angle back to where it should be.
Okay, gotcha. Now, is there any downside to a 6.4? I know there's like a few different ways to do it, but were there any downsides or trade-offs that you guys experienced in this process?
It's not a 6.7. I mean, you lose 0.3 of a liter. Nothing really that you're truthfully, that the average person's truthfully going to notice. The only thing that I found that works better is, to go to a deck plate setup. But there again, then you get even more time and money involved into the engine build to go to a deck plate. So, I mean, without getting into the high-end deck plate engine and the few little constraints that come with having a deck plate, especially in a street truck, the 6.4 is kind of the be-all, end-all.
I know the 6.7 Cummins guys they're gonna be listening, and those trucks have come a long way as far as power, but when you had mentioned it's not a 6.7 for those guys, so they understand when you start getting over that 1,200, 1,300 horse mark, what does that engine? What's its downfall with the rod angles and the block and just the whole setup that it's kind of holding them back in a holding pattern where you guys aren't saying, well, let me go get a 6.7 Cummins block and build it. you're going a different route and doing the 6.4?
The main issue that we see with the 6.7 above the 12 to 1300 horsepower mark lies mainly in the block. Yes, it's a Siamese block, but the block can't handle the cylinder pressure that you're making at 1300 horsepower, especially on a big upshift, like on a 3.4 upshift in a 48 truck, where it really puts the truck back into peak torque really quick, snap of a finger kind of deal.
Yeah.
And cylinder pressure spikes. We're seeing a lot of blocks crack, vertical in the cylinder. So crack the cylinder, split the block from top to bottom. And again, it pushes compression into the water jackets, obviously. That just 12 to 1300 horsepower, and it's not necessarily just a 6.7 thing. 5.9 or 6.7 block, either one, at that power level, you're running borrowed time on how long the block is going to last before it does split a cylinder. And that's why, you see guys that are going, for the 12 to 1300 plus horsepower trucks are going to a sleeve. The sleeve is realistically a little bit better material and handles the increased cylinder pressure a lot better than just the factory block does.
That was the next thing I was kind of thinking that, these guys are going to be asking. It's like, what's a sleeve? Why is it better? And I mean, you answered it there, and you can see how this has come so far kind of quick, with the power levels and the other, the air and the fueling and the tuning. And we're starting to see more of these kind of hybrid engines or these 6.4 setups out there. And I'm sure for you guys and your team, when you don't have the bearing failures and you don't have the issues, you guys can take the truck more places. You can do more things with it. There's less downtime with it.
Oh yes, definitely. And that's another benefit, realistically speaking, to a sleeved engine is where sometimes there's just no way around it. Be it you have not enough injector or whatever, the pulse width's cranked way out to make the number you need to, because you couldn't get a bigger injector in time for the next event. You take a truck that's got the pulse cranked up and melt the piston, or melt the piston for any reason really. You melt the piston in a sleeved engine, you don't have to pull the block. I mean, technically, don't have to pull the block out and send it off to have the cylinder bored or whatever. Our sleeved engines, we can replace a sleeve, piston, and back up and running. It does make the rebuild process a little easier. Obviously, it's not ideal to just drop a liner and a piston in, but in competition, sometimes that's just the only option you've got.
Yeah, but like you said, it's definitely quicker, easier, less expensive than a bunch of machine work and yanking an engine and all the time and lead time with everything.
Right, definitely. When you can cut that step out, especially you get into the heat of a points chase or whatever, and you can cut the time out where you don't have to go to the machine shop with a block and hope that they've got it back to you in time to get it assembled for the next weekend. Like I said, it's not a perfect world, but it's a whole lot easier to pull a sleeve or a liner and put, replace it and a piston and get the engine back together and be back up and ready to go than it is to cross your fingers and hope that the machine shop can get you taken care of in time.
But kind of on the opposite end of that is, say, if you put this in a truck that you may drive every day or a few times a week or something like that, how do these setups hold up to daily driving, heat cycles, stop and go traffic, things like that?
A lot of it, I'm assuming you're speaking mainly on sleeved engines. A lot of the sleeved engines do really well. A lot of it comes back into what sleeve you use, what design sleeve you use. Obviously, there's some sleeve designs out there that will not work in a stock truck. They'll work, but it's, a roll of the dice on how long the engine's going to last with that sleeve in it. we have a few engines that are, sleeved 6.4s that have got, quite a few miles on them. Cast pistons, sleeved back down to standard 6.7 bore that are, 30,000 mile engines, or are running at 30,000 miles, 1,200 horsepower with no negative effects. But, once you start getting into the sleeved engines, it's a whole lot more than just ordering a set of pistons and rings and everything and assembling an engine. You've got to have a quality machine shop that knows 100% what they're doing to be able to spec the sleeve, or a shop in general that can spec the sleeve out, because, like I said, your general repair sleeves are not going to work. They're going to cause more trouble than good.
That's definitely where, say shops like yours, with the experience you guys have, if somebody wants to do this, it's not just like going on a drop-down menu and selecting something and, waiting for an engine to show up. You guys are able to advise this truck owner and say, you should go this route, this is why, this is how you're going to use the truck, this is going to serve you best. So it's a guesswork, by the truck owners taken away, which is great because it's a lot of money and time and everything else involved.
Oh, yes, definitely. And that's, I think that a lot of people look at the shops as, they just want you to buy the biggest and the best. But a lot of times it is more of a, hey, I've been there, I've been through multiple engines trying to do what you're doing. And if you don't go this direction with it, you're going to have problems down the road. We can kind of, with a power goal and knowing how you're going to use the truck, we can tell you, pretty well spot on for 90% of the scenarios how the truck is going to live, whether you're going to have issues, and once you start getting into the 1,300 to 1,500 horsepower range, of course, anything can happen. But we can kind of advise you on what is going to, what's going to live the longest or have the best chance of surviving at that power level.
That's a really good point you brought up, which I remember seeing it for years. Like when I got into diesels, I was just going on forums and reading and then getting magazines and all those sorts of things. Is sometimes there's that perception that, well, the shop's just trying to get me to spend an extra $500 or an extra $1,500. But these, like, you guys are enthusiasts first. Second, these are businesses you guys invest so much time, effort, money into. Families are involved, friends are involved. It's very much a team effort. And one of the worst things, I'm sure you've seen it in your career before, is you never want to have a customer, come back and say, wow, I wish I would have done this, or, oh, I got the wrong setup and now my truck's down for 3 months, and, they feel like they wasted money. So it's that integrity that shops like yours have, where you guys want to make sure the customer is taken care of, whether they don't spend an extra $500 or they spend an extra $500. It's what setup's best for this truck.
Right. And that, I tell a lot of guys, there's a lot of guys that want to make that big number, 13 to 1,500 horsepower, or even 1,000 plus horsepower, we'll say. The initial investment is expensive, but if you think the initial investment's expensive, you need to sit back and look at what you're going to spend per year, especially if you're going to beat on the truck, which you obviously are. You're not building a 1,000 horsepower truck to, drive back and forth to the grocery store. Yes, you can do it, but that's not the sole purpose of it. If you're building a 1,000 plus horsepower truck, you're going to beat on it. That's nature. You have a lot of guys that want to do this, and it's like, okay, here's what it's going to cost you to get there, but you also need to think about what it's going to cost you, every week or whatever. If you're racing it every week, what it's going to cost you every week, or if you're racing it on a weekend, what it's going to cost you every season, to maintain the truck. Because you're not talking about making an oil change every 5,000 miles in a 1,000 horsepower truck and that being the only maintenance you've got to do. I mean, at that power level, you're looking at, you know, some of your transmission parts even are going to become consumables. You know, in the 13 to 1500 horsepower range, we're doing off-season checks on 90% of the engine components, you know, whether it be just pulling the pan and spinning a set of bearings in it, you know, compression tests, so forth and so on. You cannot, it doesn't matter what you spend up front, you're not going to be able to just flog it every time you start it and not do any maintenance on it. The cost of horsepower at that point is not so much the initial as it is the maintenance cost.
That is an excellent point because, you know, say it's 700, 800, 900 horse, you can probably extend things out a little bit and you're maybe not taking it out every weekend during the summer. But when we're talking a 6.4 engine and the kind of injectors and, you know, CP3 setup and turbo setup and transmission setup, you're investing in taking it out to perform. And it's like any other motorsport. There's maintenance that comes with it, or your investment, you know, is going to suffer, and it's going to be a lot of repairs.
Yes, definitely. That's, you know, like with our shop truck, we see that. I mean, you get a feel for it, and you can kind of get down to a science on how often it needs to be maintained, more than just your fluids and filters. But it's definitely there. You know, at the point, we build a lot of 6.4s, you know, non-sleeved, just a basic 6.4, 80 thousandths longer rod, stock block for the 1,000 horsepower less trucks. They do great all the way up to the, you know, 1,200 horsepower range. But there comes a time where when you cross this line, you have extra accrued costs of maintenance. And there's no way around it. I mean, it's either, you know, you spend the money to maintain it, or you spend the money when you have a failure, and it's going to be a whole lot more expensive when it fails.
And for the guys out there listening, where do you guys take this truck in case they want to see it? You know, talk to you guys, get some, you know, maybe some feedback or ask you some questions in person.
We hit most of the ODSS races. We're currently getting the cage finished up and certified and everything, and then hopefully, you know, be back out within, for Rocky Top at least. We also hit a lot of the local tracks in the southern Illinois, southern Indiana, western Kentucky area. So if you see us at any event, feel free, you know, stop in, say hi, check us out on Facebook. You know, any questions, feel free to give us a shout, and we'll help you as best as we can.
I'm so glad I got to be able to chat with you today about this engine setup, because it's starting to gain more, you know, interest and become more mainstream, and there's a good amount of questions that pop up that the guys ask us. You know, what is this setup? When do I need it? Why should I go to it? And you answered a lot of those questions, and it gives Cummins guys something to think about. You know, especially if they're gonna start taking it to events and you know, trying to be consistently competitive, you know, with it in a controlled environment or a series.
Yes, definitely. And, you know, that compared to some of your other alternatives, the 6.4 is more of a, you know, entry level, you know, a good entry to start with your quest for horsepower versus, you know, getting into some of the deck plate or other engines. You know, you can, as long as you use a little judgment, you can start with the basic 6.4, and as your goals change, or as your needs change, rather, you can work your way from that into, you know, a sleeved 6.4 that'll handle, you know, 1,500 plus horsepower. So I mean, they're kind of, I feel like they're a little more modular than some of the other alternatives, and it's a little cheaper to expand upon as you go, than, say, going from a 6.7 to a deck plate, or, you know, right into a deck plate, I guess I should say, or whatever.
Save some money for other upgrades. Awesome, Ryan. Well, like I said, appreciate your time today. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience and giving us all something to think about on these builds.
Yes, sir. Not a problem. Thank you for having us.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and check out ATS Diesel and Dan's Diesel Performance. They got a ton of cool products for everything from mid-90s trucks all the way to current, everything in between, for bolt-on stuff, full builds, no matter what it is, they've got everything. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.